Keep watching to find out my top tip on finding an English-speaking French accountant. Hello everybody, welcome to Life in France. I'm just doing my accounts, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about accountants in the UK and accountants in France. All part of Life in France. I'm doing my own accounts now, and basically the only difference is I'm going to do the final figures myself because I finished the relationship with the accountant I was using in the UK to do all the French accounts for me. Basically how I do my accounts, I'm a salesman at heart, and my office was always the messiest office, but I produced the most amount of business, so my manager didn't mind. But with regards to accounts, I don't do them on a weekly or monthly basis. I just chuck all my receipts in a big box as I go along during the course of the year. And then in the new year, I sit down, like today, and do all the paperwork. It takes about a week for me to do it. Basically, I've got 12 big envelopes, one for each month. I go through all my receipts, put all the January receipts in January, February and March and so forth. I then go through each month and basically put all the receipts together for the right type of item, and then just do a total add up. And for example, January could have electricity, 300 euros, household and DIY, 300 euros, and so forth. And that goes on throughout the whole year. And then what I used to do was pass these 12 envelopes with the final figures for every single item to my accountant, and he would literally do it in a day and send the accounts back. But what I'm going to be doing this year is doing the final figures myself and submitting my tax returns to the French tax authorities this year. And I'll explain why in a minute. Guys, over the last 34 years, I've been mainly self-employed. And in the UK and in France, I've used a total of 5 accountants. On the second time I became self-employed in the UK, we used my business partner's best friend as our accountant. So we thought we were getting friendly rates, but unfortunately he was situated in a big city and he was charging us £1,200 per year. And when our partnership dissolved, I went to him and said, look, because it's just me now, is there any flexibility with your rates? And he said, no, sorry Mark, it's £1,200 a year. And at that point I looked around and I found a new accountant in Huntingdon, which is basically a smaller town, and he was willing to do my account, same job, £450. So exactly the same with accountants in the UK as in France. If you can find an accountant that's not in a big city, you'll find that his rates will be a lot cheaper. Now, when I first started my business in France, when I started my life in France, I just took on the accountants of the previous owners, and she's basically set me up as a business, registered me with all the French regulatory organisations, and everything was simplistic. And whereas the previous owners had 4 holiday cottages, I only had 1. So she said, what I do, Mark, I just charge you 750 euros. The thing I noticed though, every year her fees were going up. Plus taxes were on top of that as well. And eventually I was coming in at almost 1,100 euros per year, which was a huge percentage of my turnover. And eventually she wouldn't agree to reduce her prices, so I found a new accountant. And I actually found an English guy based in England who was willing to have French clients. And he was only going to charge £300 a year. What a difference. So I took him on board, and my accounts throughout the 34 years have always been the same in what you've just seen. In that basically it's so simple. I get 12 envelopes, put all my receipts per month in each one, top them all up and give a balance for each different sort of sector of receipts. Sort of fuel, car stuff, clothing, subsistence and so forth. And then on the flip side, I will give a report of my full income. And I used to hand that to the accountants, and they could do it in less than a week. And that was why it was so simplistic. But what happened in France was that she was unwilling to reduce the prices, so I found this English guy. Unfortunately though, after a couple of years, I just got fed up with having to direct him on the right course of action. At one point he wanted to offset national insurance contributions against my revenue, and I said, no, that can't happen. I've looked it up, you can't do that. And there was other little bits and pieces that I was having to sort of like point him in the right direction. And I just thought, sorry, you're supposed to be the professional accountant. Why am I telling you how to do the job? So after a couple of years, I went back to the initial French accountant. Now she's now moved away from her family business and she's working for a large accountancy firm. Guys, I was always told as a financial advisor, make sure you cross all the T's, dot all the I's, because it's your paperwork that protects you for any future complaints. And that's always been drummed into me throughout my career. So I've always been good at sending emails to people and keeping a document trail of anything that I do. And when I approached the French accountant again, I said, look, I'd love for you to be my accountant again. It hasn't worked out well with this previous guy, but I'm not willing to pay $1,100. And she turned around and said, well, we can do it for $1,000. I said, okay, $1,000 inclusive of taxes, please. Because you know the situation, I'm not a big business. It's very easy for me to do. €1,000 including tax. And she agreed it in emails. So I said, right, fine. But then she put a little caveat in. She said, okay, we'll do it for $1,000, but we insist that we do the previous year to make sure everything's legitimate, and we'll then do this year's as well. And I thought, oh, okay, so €2,000. But, I've saved a bit of money in the past using this English guy. So I agreed for her to reassess the accounts from the previous year. Once she'd been working on it for about 3 or 4 weeks, I got an email. Would you like to come into the office? We've got these accounts done for you. We've found a little bit of discrepancy. And by the way, you can settle your bill, €1,250. I think, hang on, 1,250? Oh yes, well you got the taxes on top. I said, no, we've agreed that you were going to do it for £1,000, €1,000 including taxes. Oh, I spoke to my boss and he wasn't willing to do it. Well, then you should have contacted me, because I would have said, don't proceed. Oh, you better come into our office then and speak to my boss. So we arranged a date. I've gone into the office, and he came in after about 5 minutes and he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder. And he said, we want you to pay $1,250, that's it. I said, sorry, I brought the emails with me. I said, look, I've got it in writing, €1,000 including taxes. I'm not paying any more. And by the way, these accounts that you've sent me, the previous English accountant had done, why is there a discrepancy on the revenue? What's the one thing you can't get wrong when doing accounts? The revenue. And they'd added an extra 3,000 in. I said, where's that come from? And they couldn't explain it. I said, look, if you can't get the basics right, and you've insisted that you need to check the previous accountant's work, yet your figures are incorrect, you're now trying to charge me an extra 250 plus euros. Why on earth should I proceed? I said, and I basically called the boss an imbecile, an idiot. And he jumped out of his chair, grabbed hold of my accounts and just threw them on the floor. I said, that's it. I don't want you as a client. I said, fair enough. I said, can I have my other accounts paperwork then, please? Because I assume you haven't even started those yet. And they hadn't. So my accountant, the girl, she went up, got all the stuff, all my paperwork back, and they brought a security card down with her, and they handed over me the paperwork. And I said to her, sorry, look, there's no way I'm continuing working with you guys. As far as I'm concerned, you've lied to me. You're trying to rip me off. I've got it in black and white that you're only going to charge me €1,000. You're the ones who have insisted to charge me twice. You want to go back and recheck my English accounts figures. And yet you guys get it wrong. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not working with you. So I gathered all my paperwork up, walked out the office, and do you know that accountancy firm tried probably 4 times over the next 2 years to try to get me to pay €2,500. for work they haven't even done. Yet they tried it on, and I just said, sorry, take me to court if you want, because I've got it in black and white. You've agreed €1,000, no extra charges, and basically that was the contract I had with you. And you haven't even done the second year's accounts, so come on, bring it on then. And so I left her, and I went back to the English accountant, and I'd been with him for the remaining sort of 5 or 6 years. But unfortunately, due to COVID, he contacted me last year and said, Mark, I've had a rethink on my business plan and I'm no longer looking after small clients. Which was amazing to me because, especially in the situation where a lot of businesses are going under, surely it's better to earn, say, £5,000 from 10 clients than £5,000 from a bigger client. Because if one of those big clients goes bust, you lose a huge amount of revenue. But the chances of all those 10 small ones going bust is pretty remote. At least yet trickling income in for him. And I was surprised when he came out with that decision. And he basically said, you need to find another accountant. So I contacted some accountants in France, and basically their decision was, Mark, we can't really benefit you. You're such a small entity, you know, the amount we're going to charge you, you're never really going to see any benefit. You might as well do your own accounts. So that's what I'm doing now. As you've seen before, I'm creating my own accounts. And the way I look at it, like with any job that I do in France, rather than me pay out now £350 to this English accountant for an extra day's work, the way I look at it, I've earned £350 because I'm not paying someone else. So yes, it's an extra day's work for me, but the way I look at it, I've earned £350, let alone €1,000+. Guys, quick tip, if you do need to find an accountant in France, speak to someone already here that's English, that's self-employed, and just ask them, who do they use? Because I found it so hard to find English-speaking French accountants. The person that I contacted in Pontivy was the accountant of my plumber friend. And it was them that gave me the advice just to do it myself. So just a quick tip, if you're looking to find a French accountant, find someone who's English, that's self-employed, and just ask them who they use. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this small slice of life in France. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and don't forget, hit the red button so you don't miss any future releases. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon. Stay safe. Take care, everybody.